Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, my name is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with Alyssa Schmidt, and she's up in Canada, and she has an incredible backstory for us. She is a health and wellness expert, and I really want to find out more about that because even though I'm not quote unquote an expert, I do prioritize my health, despite the fact that I had a heart attack in October last year. Um, I do exercise every day. I used to run. I now walk because of my age. And I do hit the weights as often as I can. Alyssa, tell us your story. Well, first tell us who you are, and then let's get into your story.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, my name's Alyssa, and I'm one of the owners and the founder of 4 Points Health and Wellness here in Edmonton, Alberta. I started the company it's about 8 or 9 years ago now. And it kind of came from a background of working with trauma. That's where it all started. That's where the idea started. So I was working with children and adolescents with trauma in a treatment home setting. And I just was kind of seeing some holes in the system there. And when I came in, you know, athletes or athletics was always my thing growing up. So the second I came in there, the kids were glued to the TV and, to electronics and stuff like that. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? So I had my background was actually in research autism and working with children with developmental delays and stuff like that. So I was used to kind of using play therapy and stuff in my line of work. So I started to bring that into the house, and we started, being more physically active, going to the park, playing with them, spending time with them. I was seeing a lot of the staff disconnected from the kids and on their phones, which as humans, we need to connect to others. And when it comes to trauma, a lot of times when we suffer trauma, it comes from a disconnect from others, whether that was your parent, whether it was from wherever it is, whoever it is, whatever relationship, or if it's a connection with yourself. Usually one of the big parts that comes from trauma is disconnect. So a big
Well,
part I want to
can you stop there real quick? So trauma is a big umbrella word. When you talk about trauma, what are you really talking about?
trauma, I mean, I would say anything that causes hurt or is a painful experience at a cellular level, at a deeper spiritual level of ourselves. Because I mean, when we think about trauma, especially developmental trauma, it can happen so easily, right? You can be born with developmental trauma. You're premature, or you have a parent who um, either is in an abusive environment or doing drugs, alcohol, things like that. Then you're already coming into this world traumatized and you haven't even taken your first breath yet. So trauma can happen in utero, and that's one thing a lot of people don't think about. They're like, oh, it has to come from an experience. Well, remember that connection people have in utero with their mom is already a connection that can become disconnected.
Hmm.
In utero is a really important time in our lives with that parent, and it's a time where we can start to build our attachment before we're even taking our first breaths out of utero. So trauma is a big thing.
I totally agree. And I did some volunteer work in a hospital long, long time ago when I was in, for my 4 year college degree, my first degree. And I did see that. The preemies would often just be in well, they're really this little cubicle, little thing, being hooked up to all kind of monitors and whatnot, and they would just be crying a whole lot. And so I definitely agree that at that time, even being born, um, you know, you could be traumatized and not even recognize it or realize it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and even as infants and babies, I mean, yeah, you look at the NICU babies, we've gotten so much better now. I mean, I was actually a premature baby. I was about 2 months preemie, so I was in the incubator right away. And I remember my parents saying, they would touch me, they would reach through with gloves. And if
Right.
you think what that does, not saying I'm super fucked up, but I have my issues and I've had to work on it. I would be lying if I said I didn't have any attachment issues that have come from, either with my birth or through my life and my experiences. Everyone has trauma, everyone has shit. So, but it's come a long ways because they realized how important like skin to skin contact with the parent is with infants. The second they're born, you need that skin to skin contact because you start building attachment right then and there. Development with the vagus nerve, that's a huge thing when it comes to trauma. I don't know if you know much about polyvagal theory, But that's
No,
a whole nother thing we won't get
oh,
into.
okay.
This is really good to look into if you ever want to look into polyvagal theory, stuff like that. But so, I mean, trauma, it can start with, there doesn't even have to be an intention to cause trauma. It can happen naturally through, say birth or experiences like that. And then we go through our life and then we have our experiences. And, with the kids that I was working with, for example, they would either have there would be either physical, emotional, sexual trauma. It varied depending on the kids. And I worked with 5 to 12-year-olds. So I worked with the kids side. And it's really tough when you think about kids that young suffering sexual abuse and, the neglect that they might have had back then. Some of them were, developmentally damaged, or their brains are damaged from mothers who were on cocaine during birth. Or while carrying them and stuff like that. So we had a wide range. The traumas varied quite a bit. Some of them are really ugly stories that I won't get into. But so there's a lot of different things that we had to deal with. And when I came in there to work there, I was like, okay, we do group therapy once a week. We work with a psychologist once a week. And then basically we were with them from the time they woke up, they would go to school until we put them to bed. And that was all based on attachment theory. That was the basis of the, I guess, therapeutic process used in that house. It was interesting. And so it was all based on attachment. We, didn't believe in doing the behavioral work, like the behavior rooms where they put you in, shut the door, it's all padded. None of that. It was all attachment work. So you were always with them, even through the toughest times. You hold them. Sometimes that hold would be more like a restraint to keep everyone safe, but you were always with them no matter how hard they were struggling to rebuild the bonds of attachment that were lost. And so again, breaking the bonds of attachment, again, disconnect, right? So when we think about it, you look at it from a mind, body, soul perspective. And that's kind of what I started bringing into the household, where I'm like, okay, well, how are they moving their bodies every single day? These kids need to move the energy that's built up. Especially when you're dealing with kids, talk therapy can be hard. It's sometimes you can't verbalize everything that's gone on in your life. So being able to move your body and express it differently might be a valuable source to them. And playing with them, connecting with them, getting to play Lego and do more things that are engaging, getting them to work with each other in the household and build those bonds with each other and the social ties was one way. And then it was, what are they putting into their bodies? A lot of times when we look at group homes and stuff like that, most people aren't educated in nutrition or anything like that, or the effects that it has. And you look at a lot of the research on, refined sugars and dyes and processed foods on children's behavior, especially things with ADHD and stuff like that. It can have a really big effect due to how it works on our brain. So another big thing was, let's bring in fruits and vegetables. And one of my co-workers and one of my good friends that I ended up being roommates with at the time, she was doing a study for school, I believe. So she did like healthy chef program with them, and we had them helping us prepare every meal. So they were learning how to prepare healthy meals. They were learning how to, cut up fruits and vegetables, but that also gave them a sense of purpose and pride when, we're having dinner and the other kids could be like, oh man, that's a really good salad, like really good job on the meal. And you could just see them light up doing things like that. And so we just started working on some of those. Then we brought in a sensory room. When I was in a trauma conference in the States, I learned about neurofeedback. So I brought that back. I went to the States and took a course and learned it. And so we started doing neurofeedback in conjunction with psychotherapy. So just bringing in the multiple modalities. And my thesis with autism also was about multiple modalities and how they contributed to emotion recognition using perceptual cues. So I guess I've kind of always been on this path of combining modalities just from different perspectives. Where the breakdown really happened was when I was working with trauma. They always say, you start working on it and your own shit's going to come up eventually, which it did. And it slapped me in the face really hard. It actually started when I was at that conference. And I all of a sudden just started getting flashbacks. And I remember the first one, I was in the middle of a conference, they were talking about something, and all of a sudden it was like, bam, a memory hit me. And I was like, what the hell? Okay, moving on. And then I started having nightmares and night terrors, and it just started coming out. And I thought I was going crazy because then I started trying to handle it on my own. So I was like, this is what I do for a living. I can handle trauma. So I picked up some books and I was like, I'll figure this out myself. I started seeing an acupuncturist, and that's where it all really let loose. I as soon as I stepped in the room, she started working on me, and I guess she didn't realize the point that I was at. And the first thing she said was like, "Oh, can you tell me more about the abuse you suffered as a child?" And I was like, "What?" And I honestly wasn't there yet. I had some stuff coming up, but I wasn't really there. And she's like, "Okay, well, here's your homework. Here's what I want you to do." And a lot of it was sitting down with myself, going through a meditation process, which I'd never done in my life. At that point, I honestly struggled to sit with myself. I was always busy. I worked anywhere from 12 to 22 hours a day plus. Um, I worked really long shifts. I kept myself busy. I didn't just sit down and relax. And that was just not a thing I did at the time. I was always on the go. I always had plans. And sitting with myself, more of it started coming up, and I felt more and more crazy. And then I remember at one point I was looking into like, oh my God, I need to go to an institution or something because I don't know what's going on. And I became suicidal. I was abusing pharmaceuticals just to try and numb it out, just to get some sleep, because I was only sleeping like a few hours a night, and then going back at it because I'd finished my shift at 11. And then I was starting to do personal training on the side. So I'd be up at 6 a.m. and ready to go. But when you get off work at 11, that doesn't give you much time to rest. So I'd be coming home, taking whatever I could to turn everything off, numb it all out, go to bed, wake up and do it all in the morning. So I was pretty numb. And then I had a childhood friend over, and, we had gone out and we were hanging out. She's like, "Oh, I'll just stay the night at your place." And we'd known each other for 30 years. And she's now in the industry working in a halfway house. And so she was doing her courses on pedophilia and stuff at the time. And she brought it up. She's like, "Hey, have you ever given it thought why we called, you know, he wasn't biologically related, but," she's like, "Well, we called him creepy grandpa. Like, do you remember things that were going on with this guy?" And I'm like, you know what? I just started going to therapy because I said, all of this has started coming up. I've been confused. I thought I was going crazy. And she's like, "You're not crazy. It's been coming up for me too." She's like, "Now that it's coming out and I'm thinking about our childhood and thinking about some of the things that happened," she's like, "Yeah, some of that wasn't okay." And I'm like, and she said, "What's your story? Like, what happened? Because, those were your babysitters." And my mom's mom, unfortunately, did have mental health issues and drug abuse issues. So she wasn't always, I would say, in her greatest state of mind. So yeah, there were some things that did happen as a child that I had to process and figure out. And that's where the idea of 4 Points Health and Wellness kind of came from, because I was going into therapy twice a week at that point. I was going to the gym every single day only because I knew that I should. I was started going to yoga. I was introduced to craniosacral therapy at the time that ended up becoming a very powerful modality for me.
What? What is that? What is that?
Craniosacral, um, it's basically a lot of people. I mean, if you were to relate it to a more known modality, be like a massage therapist can be a craniosacral therapist. You have your cranium right here in your head, and then you have your sacral part of your spine, and then you have the dural tube that runs down your spine. And basically, kind of with craniosacral therapy, what they say is your issues live in your tissues, and they're kind of untangling the tissues, and they can feel, when people say, "Oh, it's psychosomatic," right? "Oh, it's this, and it's in your body." And that we have the book Body Keeps the Score now, and they talk about this a lot, where we have these psychosomatic issues that live in the body and things that present themselves where, you have pain that just won't go away. It can't resolve. There's no medical reasoning for it. And then, you release this trauma and the pains are gone. So psychosomatic stuff. So basically craniosacral therapy works in that mindset where, with, say, some of them do somatic release, they'll be talking to you while they're working through your tissues, and they can kind of feel what's going on, and they're like, "Okay, let's talk through it and unravel it," whatever you're holding in your body. So it's become more known in the trauma world now to use craniosacral therapy. It's also one where the person doesn't have to talk if they don't want to, but let's just think about it as undoing some of the kinks so that things can flow better in the body and moving it through the body. That's basically what craniosacral therapy would be. So yeah, I was introduced to all these weird modalities during that journey. If I go way back to my university days, I was very medical based. I was in pre-med before I went into psychology. So for me to accept modalities like acupuncture, yoga, craniosacral therapy, that was a very new perspective that I gained. And I would say I'm glad I did, because I was very naive when I just looked at it from a medical model. And I was missing a lot of other things that help to heal things that we can't see and measure and quantify. Like trauma is very hard. You cannot quantify trauma. There's some things we can look at, but well, a lot of the things that come with trauma, whether you're looking at it from the mental, the emotional, or the psychosomatic perspective, what are you going to do? There's no pills for that.
Mm.
There's no pills for that. We have to do the work. So going into modalities that help you move and peel back those layers of yourself is the only way to start to really tackle trauma. So that's kind of what I did. And then I was looking at it and I went, I'm seeing all these practitioners all the time. I was running all over Edmonton and none of them communicated with each other. And I was like, you know what? If you guys had all just spoken with each other, I bet this would have been a much easier process. So that's when the vision of 4 Points came, where I said, you know what? I would love to create a space for people to come heal, where we kind of take the thinking out of it. We're here to help them and point them in the right direction. And with trauma, you don't want them having to repeat their story over and over and over again. Because when I first started, I couldn't talk about it. Like I wouldn't use names. I wouldn't really talk about the events specifically. I couldn't. So if I'm trying to get at it and I ask people to go through that constantly, it could be more destructive and cause more harm than good. So we wanted to create a space where we can work collectively as a team and work together with people to kind of, create that environment where they're like, okay, they've got me, I'm safe. Doesn't matter who I see here, they all work together, they got my back. And that's kind of what 4 Points was all about, was creating a non-judgmental community where people feel safe enough to come and heal and just let us take care of them and take some of the guesswork out of it. And also you're not going to be paying quite as much because we can probably work on that with them. But also if we can be effective and efficient with our treatment, you're not going to need to go quite as many times to everyone, right? Whereas that comes back again to connection. Even when we're trying to heal our disconnects, it's a lot easier when we're in an environment that's connected. And in 4 Points, we connect the mind, body, and soul modalities all together and we work together. So everything to me is just all about the connection process. And then through those modalities, we help others rebuild that connection with their self that may have been broken down, whether it's through trauma or just life. We're always on the go. The way that we work, the way that we live, it's really easy to become disconnected from ourselves. Just working, hustling, at work when I'm busy at running 4 Points, and there's been times I don't even have time to think about myself or breathe or take a moment and sit with myself and do proper self-care. And I know that. But it does happen to all of us. So that was kind of that's kind of how 4 Points came to be. And since then, I've just been building on that.
For the past 8 or 9 years, then, because this has been going for a while.
Yeah, so it kind of started small. It was just me and doing, I was neurofeedback, personal training, and all that fun stuff, yoga. And then I brought on other people. I had a original business partner, and I was like, you know what, if you do the neurofeedback, I'll handle the physical side of the business, and that'll be, fitness. Because it's a little bit, at that time, I had more of a community that I had already built with fitness. And then I met my next business partner, Brett, and my current business partner, and he's a chiro. So then our values, our visions, all of that really lined up. And he was able to help me navigate how to bring the medical and paramedical side in, because that's something I had the vision, but I had no idea how that system worked. And so once I had Brett on board, my strength is finding people, making connections, and finding their talents to bring them in and work with me. Brett's really good at saying, like, okay, here's how we make it work. Here's like all the ethics and the ethical and legal things that we need to do to make this happen. So we became a really strong team, and we've expanded since then and kind of honed into the practices a little bit, our own practices a little bit more. And over the years, I guess mine really came into program development. And as I've been asked through COVID and stuff to talk, most of my articles and presentations I've given, they're always like, can you talk about stress? Can you talk about like, what is it that you do? And that's where I think in my last, I'm not sure which Blue Talk book you read, if it was the Bolstering Resilience or okay, well, the volume 4.
Because I'm in 5.
Okay, cool.
I'm in the
Yeah, so
next one.
gotcha. Yeah, so the one, I think it was volume 2 or 3 was the first one. And
Okay.
I talked about is not your identity. And that was both of them were written after severe losses in my life. So that one was based after my papa passed away. And I had obviously been consumed in running this business and getting it off the ground, which you have to do. But one of my first thoughts after was like, you know what, I kind of lost sight of spending time with family as much as I would have liked to. And with him, I mean, I had lived with him for 3 years, and I got a lot more, grandfather, granddaughter time than most people. So I don't have too many regrets with that at all. But it was a thought that crossed my mind. So that's why the first one was about your business is not your identity. There's a lot more to life. And again, it's coming down to connecting with our family and our people around us, and, making sure that we prioritize that and not lose sight of it. Because, I mean, in the end, if we lose our career or, something ever happened to 4 points, who's it left and what's left afterwards? So making sure that we don't lose sight of our relationships and our family and those who support us to help us succeed in our businesses and what we do for a living. In the end, it's whether you have a career or you're running your own business, you do have a support system that helps you thrive in that career or business. So you still need to nurture those relationships and make sure that you attend to them properly and be present and give your full attention to those relationships when you are with them. So that was number one. And then the last one that you read, the Bolstering Resilience, because I was going to do a talk. I did do a talk with Corey at the U of A last summer. And when he first asked me, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I know I have something, but I couldn't figure it out. And as I started talking to friends and working with some business coaches, answering some of the hard questions, I was able to start putting more language to it. And that's where I was like, oh, I help people bolster resilience through healthy living. Because when I go back through my journey and what I brought into the treatment home, it was really just helping myself and helping the kids bolster resilience. I brought in different tools that they could use, different, from, if you want to look at the health wheel, different mind, body, and soul tools that we could use. That's all I did. And over that time, even when it came to this last one, I had lost my mom. She was going through her cancer. We had just gotten diagnosed and going through it when Corey had asked me to talk. And then I was like, I can't even think about a talk right now, Corey. Like, I need to deal with my mom. We had just lost her dad 6 months before, and they were like father figure, my mom. So they were like my support systems and my roots, like my biggest connections in my life. So I was dealing with that. And when she did pass away, obviously you're an absolute mess. You feel broken. It's like a loss that you could never imagine what it feel like. Like when I lost my papa, I was like, this is going to be the worst. Like, this is going to be the most pain I'm going to feel of this decade for sure. That was my thought in that moment. I'm like, this is my biggest loss. I've never felt this way before. That was the biggest loss I'd ever suffered in my life to that point. And in no way did I expect to lose my mom a year and a half after that. So wrecked, very, very numb after she died. And I was just like, I couldn't cook. I went and worked out because I had to. I think I dropped my hours, but we were in the process of expanding into the space that I'm in now. This was just last year. And I was like, okay, try and keep going, got to push through. Like, I knew there was things that I had to do to keep my head above water. And that's kind of where I've put the language to it of saying that's resilience, is when your life is just a storm, but you can keep your head up out of the water so you don't drown completely. When I first had all of my stuff come up and I turned to drugs and I felt lost and I was suicidal, that was right before I started 4 Points. It's because I didn't have those tools and I didn't have the resilience at that time to get through it the way that I did losing my mom or losing my papa. At that point I went, okay, what can I control right now? Like, I'm going to be grieving. I'm going to be hurting. This isn't going to stop anytime soon. But what can I control right now to try and help bring stability back? How do I get grounded again and, try and take a breath and move forward, because we still need to move forward. And that's where the book that or the chapter that you read, that's where it all started. Is like, okay, start from the smallest one that you can, which is the physical side. Take control of that, and then start moving up the ladder to the other levels. We have, the physical, the emotional, and the mental, or the spiritual, I should say. And the spiritual is the hardest one. I would say I'm still not there yet, since working through these these last few years. So I took control of the physical right away. I was like, okay, I can't cook, but I can go to a meal prep company and make sure I'm having healthy food, no alcohol, no stimulants, nothing for a while. Make sure that I can start fueling my body properly to just try and support it and what it's going through right now, because you're exhausted. So taking that and going into, running this clinic, I have access to practitioners always. So I started booking myself in. I went back and I was doing my craniosacral therapy every month, going for massage, doing the chiropractic, and then finding, once I was a little bit more settled in that and we opened the space, I started therapy. So that's the next level, is the mental, right? Mental and emotional. Started going to therapy and doing a little bit more of that work. And right now, I'd say, like I said, I'm not really at the spiritual yet. That's kind of one where I'm struggling and still working to try and get back into that.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you, you've mentioned spirituality in terms of our holistic self, and I was wondering what that meant to you, and how you kind of look at that as part of the whole.
The spiritual side, I mean, it's so much harder. I think everyone's going to have a little bit of a slightly different definition, and that's what in the chapter as well. For me, it's my connection to myself, and the universe surrounding me and others. Some people might say that's their relationship to God, and that's their spiritual practice. I don't call it God. That's not really how I define it, but I do believe that there's something bigger than myself, that I'm surrounded by different energies, different types of people, and things that we can't control. And that was what I would say is the spiritual world around me. But a big part that I define for the spiritual side is connection with self. And with that connection to yourself, it's that best version of yourself where you have that clarity and you have that lightness and, I guess, being okay with the impermanence of life. So a lot of times when we get anxious and stuff like that, it's because we're trying to control things that we don't have control of. So accepting impermanence, that everything will be changing, not everything will be exactly as you want it to be all the time. And I think that's a big part of spirituality, and um, being able to be comfortable with that and just moving forward through it, being like, you know what? Yeah, I can't control everything, but I got this. It's cool. I'm comfortable with myself. Like, I am in my body. I know who I am and what I'm doing. And that to me is the biggest part of the spiritual side, where you don't feel, I guess, that sense of being lost. You are fulfilled. Um, you're not coming at it from a scarcity mindset, where some of us do battle with that all the time. We're like, oh, I don't have enough. I don't have enough. But when you're balanced at a spiritual level, you have enough just within yourself. Um, and I've been there when I first started 4 Points, and I had gone to an ashram for a month and went to my yoga teacher training for another month and a bit in Bali. I would say at that point, you could throw anything at me. And I was like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I could lose everything and I wouldn't have panicked. Right now, why I say I'm struggling with the spiritual side is that's not how I've been feeling. I don't feel that sense of security and groundedness within myself. It's been really broken down over the last few days with those losses and trying to find my footing again, and what that new life looks like without those people in it. And um, having that sense of security within yourself again. It's a big side of the spiritual side, I think.
I think your story is fantastic, and I can't imagine having to survive through trauma and then through it again, and then being able to talk about it. So I applaud you on all of your efforts of growth, maturity, and transformation. With a couple minutes left. What would you leave our audience? Words of hope? I don't know if the hope is the right word. Um, Give me a good word to use that would inspire somebody who's listening to your story uh, to say, I I want to get to the other side if there isn't another side of what I'm feeling and going through right now.
Hmm. Um, yeah, it's funny because like you're saying hope. I'm like, yeah, it's not really hope, but what is it? And I mean, I guess it all does come down to resilience and knowing that we can all bolster our resilience and we can all make it to the other side. You just have to put in the work, and it's hard. It's not going to be easy. It's not just going to come to you. You can't just manifest it. I'm sorry. Like I get everyone, some people like you just manifest it and everything comes into your life. No, it takes hard work, and you're going to have to do hardest parts of it to, access the deeper layers of yourself and connect with yourself is you're going to have to put in the work, and you have to get uncomfortable, and it's going to suck, but you can do it. So I would say, sit in the discomfort, do your best to push through it, find the people that you can connect with and trust to build um, relationships with, and find the modalities that work for you, because what worked for me won't work for everyone. But find communities that you can connect with, find practitioners that will help you ask deeper questions within yourself or about yourself and help guide you through that a little bit more, because we can't do everything on our own. And that's even finding a great therapist, helping challenge the constructs of the mind that you've created. The stories that you've created in your mind need to be challenged, and the mind that created them can't do that for you. Not the same way. You need somebody else to kind of push you and ask questions and do that. So find the right supports, stay the course, and, get comfortable in the discomfort. It's just going to be a wild ride.
I appreciate that. I found you through Corey's book series, but how do people typically find you? Because that's probably not the average way of going about finding 4 Points or Alyssa Smith. How do they
Yeah,
find you?
most have found me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or those have been the ones that I get the random messages have usually been through there. Um, yeah, LinkedIn has been one that I guess as people have reached out from, and then they'll find me on Google and then find me on Facebook or something like that. So
Well, then with your permission, I'll have all those links in the description. And I appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much.
thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate it.
This has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. You know how to get in touch with both of us. You guys have a great day. Take care.